Oppressing non-benders or destroying all bending, being powerless or burning down the spirit forests, oppressive government or chaotic anarchy, ineffective monarchy or tyrannical military empire. Or maybe a secret third thing. The Nickelodeon series The Legend of Korra follows in the footsteps of its predecessor Avatar The Last Airbender by sharing some pretty mature themes with its relatively young audience. While the first series focused heavily on themes of war, among other serious topics, Legend of Korra leans pretty hard into politics for much of its run. It, of course, covers other issues, strained family relationships, the difficult crossover between friendship and romance, trauma, and personal identity, but it returns again and again to large-scale societal issues. Today, we're going to look at the various political themes and see how they all tie together within the greater theme of false dichotomies. All of these major themes and plotlines start with two extremes, neither of which are desirable. A meme that started on Twitter a few years back seems to exemplify this idea of finding a third solution when it seems like only two options are provided. While it's of course meant to be humorous, it's a goofy meme after all, we're going to use it here to analyze two undesirable extremes and then find out what the secret third thing is. Season 1. The main themes in Season 1 center around privilege and marginalization, as well as what a good or bad response to that sort of marginalization might be. It does this through Korra's perspective, which is interesting because she's actually part of the privileged class in multiple different ways. She starts the series very sheltered from being cloistered away in the Southern Water Tribe her whole life, so it's not until she sneaks away to Republic City that she starts to have a new understanding of her place in the world. In the first episode, she meets a political activist talking about the inequality between benders and non-benders and how Amon will lead the equalist non-benders in revolution. The interaction doesn't really affect Korra's view on the situation, though. If anything, she's more just annoyed at the movement he stands for. It's not until episode 3 that she has her first realization that she is privileged when she puts her foot in her mouth around Mako and Bolin. When they're told that they need 30,000 yuans to enter the championship round of the pro bending tournament, it's clear they don't have anywhere near that amount of money. Bolin turns to Korra in a desperate hope that, as the Avatar, she secretly has a lot of money. Korra says she has nothing, and casually adds that she's never needed money because she's always had other people taking care of her. Mako points out that certainly means she has more than nothing. Korra immediately feels bad, especially once Bolin fills her in on the fact that he and Mako were orphaned and left in poverty at a young age, which further explains why the two of them live in the attic of the arena. Korra's home life was all she knew, and she hadn't really considered the fact that her new friends could have grown up with a different experience. Fortunately, when she's called out, she responds with an apology and somewhat greater sensitivity in the future. Later in the same episode, Bolin is pulled into doing dangerous work for a local gang so that they can get the money they need. When Korra and Mako discuss it, Mako tells her that he used to work full-time with that gang so that he could financially support himself and Bolin. Korra is initially shocked and acts a little self-righteous when she asks if Mako is some kind of criminal, but is again humbled when he points out that she doesn't understand the level of desperation he felt to make sure that he and Bolin survived. The storyline is really important, as is the fact that it's from Korra's perspective. Kids and teens getting pulled into gangs because they have no other support is a very real issue, but also one that the majority of Korra viewers probably don't have personal experience with. Gangs do engage in criminal activity, so it can be easy for someone with no understanding of the factors that lead to it to be judgmental. Too often, people in places of privilege think to themselves, well, I would never do something like that, for any desperate act they disapprove of. But the truth is you can't know that unless you're actually in that situation. This truth is presented to the audience by having sympathetic characters discuss it from two different perspectives. I think the writers were likely aware that the majority of their audience would identify more with Korra than with Mako, so having this perspective addressed by correcting the main character acts as a way to teach that audience where their thinking might be wrong. At the same time, Mako acts as representation for those who are in more difficult situations, as well as giving them some words to explain their difficult choices. Bolin and Mako's situation acts as Korra's initial exposure to the issue of privilege, but the main conflict of the season surrounds the issue of oppression inflicted by benders on non-benders. When Korra meets the protester in the first episode, he's yelling to the street about the injustice that the equalist movement seeks to correct. Completely tone deaf to the issue, she argues that bending is the coolest thing in the world. When he accuses her of probably wanting to knock him off his platform with some bending, she tells him she's considering it. This, of course, gives him a perfect illustration of the issue he's protesting, which he points out to the angry crowd. Korra makes a fool of herself here and is very much in the wrong. Yes, she has been sheltered from this issue, and her limited knowledge could be forgiven, except that when she's given new information, she reacts first with defensiveness and then with aggression. It takes until episode 8 before she finally understands the way she's been using bending to be a bully. At this point in the season, tensions have built between the equalists and the bender-led government to the point that the equalists commit a terrorist attack on the pro-bending arena. In response, one of the members of the governing council, Tarlok, declares a curfew for all non-bending citizens and shuts off the power for their homes. When the people come out to complain, he directs the police to arrest them, claiming they are equalists. When Korra confronts him in his office, she tells him that he's playing into Amon's hands by using his power to oppress and intimidate. Tarlok tells her that she's a hypocrite because she does the exact same thing. She denies it at first, but when he points out that she's at his office to intimidate him into doing what she wants, she has no response. When we look back at Korra's interaction with the Equalist protester in the first episode, and in the third when she actually does attack him to get information, it's clear how right Tarlok is. This is a fact that Korra needs to confront, and this translates into the real world as well. There are people out there who are overt bigots and are completely self-aware. They know they're hurting people, and they don't care. However, there are also people who engage in subtle acts of bigotry that don't see themselves as bigots. The second group wants to believe that the first group is the only type out there, and of course, they don't belong to that group, so they must be fine, right? Except, as any marginalized person will tell you, not engaging in direct acts of hate isn't enough. It's important to develop awareness and take a good look at your privilege to see where you could use it to help those who are marginalized. Korra isn't a bad person for being a bender, and she doesn't think of herself as someone who hates non-benders, but it's in this moment with Tarlok that she realizes that she has used her power against those without it, even though she is now fighting on their behalf. In the real world, it's important to remember that privilege shows up in small ways in our lives, and we might not even think about them because that's how our lives have always functioned. Korra is used to not worrying about money and to using bending to get her way, so it takes active effort on her part to see past that to the experiences of others. Those of us with privilege in any areas should similarly use it to help marginalized groups, while regularly checking in with ways we may have caused harm. All of that being said, the Equalists are also in the wrong. Amon and the Equalists are right that benders oppress non-benders in their society, and they are right to be upset about it. But their response is the wrong way to go about it. In a way, this situation echoes the lessons of Jet and Hama in the original series. Ill treatment and trauma aren't excuses to harm others. And yet, in the first series, we also saw Haru and the other Earthbender prisoners violently fight back against the guards, which was treated as an act of bravery and heroism. So, where's the line? Why is Haru a hero and Amon a villain? Personally, I would say there is a difference between Haru and the other Earthbenders attacking their prison guards as a means of escape, and Amon seeking out and attacking any random bender, including Tensa's young children. If Haru had followed up their attack by pinning down the warden and killing him with a boulder, or if he had hunted down the warden's family, or if he had started attacking random Fire Nation citizens like Jet and Hama did, he would definitely be considered much less of a hero. Amon is fighting against oppressors, but he does so by inciting terror among the benders as he threatens to, and in some cases does, take away their ability to bend, something that is a major part of their identities. It's shown to be an incredible violation, and it's something that leaves Korra with PTSD, as is shown later in the series. Again though, Aang took away Ozai's bending at the end of the first series, something that was viewed as a heroic act of mercy, as he did that rather than end the war by killing him. The difference is that Aang didn't then go through the Fire Nation taking away everyone's bending. It seems he didn't even do this to any of the Fire Nation soldiers. Aang did the minimum he needed to do in order to neutralize the threat, removing Ozai from his position of power. Anyone well versed in the laws around self-defense can tell you that if someone attacks you on the street, you have a right to defend yourself, up until they stop being a threat. If you keep hitting them once they're down and no longer attacking, you've crossed the line to assault yourself. If Amon used his powers to take away someone else's bending while in a fight that they instigated, that would be a totally different situation. Instead, he ambushes and kidnaps people and then presents them in front of a crowd to make an example of them when he takes their bending. Amon is not holding to that minimum that makes an action self-defense. This is what differentiates him, Jet, and Hama from people like Aang and Haru. So the benders oppress the non-benders, and Amon responds by leading a movement to destroy bending, and both are wrong. But those aren't the only two options, right? When Tarlok cuts off power to the non-benders' homes and they're outside to demand he turn it back on, one woman sees Korra approach the crowd and calls out, "Please help us, you're our avatar too." Korra is in a place of great power here, beyond even the other benders due to being the avatar, and this woman knows that the purpose of the avatar is to keep the world in balance. If Korra could remember this and do her duty, she could use her power to defend the marginalized non-benders. This is true of any of us with privilege. We can use it to defend others and effect change. I will admit, I was a little disappointed in the way the storyline wrapped up. The Equalists discover that their leader is himself a bender, and they feel betrayed and turn against him. However, their leader being a liar doesn't change the very real issue of their oppression, and when Season 2 got going, it kind of seemed like the whole issue got hand-waved away. The major shift on this front from Season 1 to Season 2 is the dissolution of the Bender-led council, replaced by a democratically elected non-Bender president. Theoretically, this does mean greater government representation for the non-Benders, which is great. And maybe ongoing systemic oppression is a topic that would have been difficult to maintain the audience's excitement and attention for if it were stressed across multiple seasons. But I do wish we'd gotten more of an on-screen solution presented. However, I do think that the real secret third thing is there if you look for it. The new democratic system of government is an improvement, but the bigger solution is on the individual level. I read once that you can't legislate bigotry into extinction. We can, and we should, use legislation to put protections in place for marginalized people against the actions of oppressors, but you can't make a law against what's in someone's mind. That sort of change needs to happen on a cultural level. If Korra came to Republic City as she was at the start of the season, where she defensively said that bending was the coolest thing in the world and implied that those who disagreed need to shut up or be knocked off their platform, and there were laws saying, "Holy crap, Korra, you can't say that in a workplace," She probably would have become more defensive and dug deeper into, well, those non-benders just want special treatment. Or, I don't know, everyone is too woke nowadays. You can't even say bending is super cool without getting fired. And yes, even within the show, she has a similar attitude toward the protester. But then again, she has experiences with Mako and Bolin that make her rethink her views on poverty, as she does eventually come to the aid of non-benders. So what's the difference? Why do Mako and Bolin get through where the protester doesn't? It's not about how nice someone is when challenging preconceived notions, or shielding them from all uncomfortable feelings. Mako isn't particularly nice or gentle about his corrections. He's brusque with Korra, and she does feel guilty. After Mako says what he does about money, Bolin smooths things over a bit, but he also elaborates on why Korra was out of line, even if she didn't realize it. In either case, the change in Korra's attitude doesn't happen because the brothers act super nice or let Korra off the hook. As the group gets to know Asami during the season, we learn that her mother was killed when a firebending gang robbed their home, and her father experienced enough grief over it that they started working with the Equalists. While they do work against her father, Korra acknowledges how hard things are for Asami during this time. I think the biggest difference here is the relationship Korra has with her friends versus what she knows of the protester and the Equalist movement. While she and Mako aren't exactly close during that early conversation, she does consider him and Bolin to be her friends, and eventually she feels the same way about Asami. Their opinions and their experiences matter to her, so when they tell her about their lives, she listens. I'm not saying the real world can be easily fixed if we all just played nice and said pretty please to our oppressors, nor is that even something we should do. There are some people who are harmful and dangerous, and you can't really make friends with them, and it's important to protect yourself. I'll talk about this further when I get to season 4. But speaking of to our friends and acquaintances and giving them a new perspective they hadn't considered before has a lot of power. This is even better when they, like Korra, are in positions of power themselves that they can use to help the cause move further with other powerful people. This can be done in conjunction with broader protesting and campaigning to get the information further and legislation to protect marginalized people from the oppressive actions of others. Both parts of this are important and work in tandem. That's the secret third thing here. Not oppression, not violent revolution, but the secret third thing, cultural change spreading from individual to individual. Season 2. The larger plotline in Season 2 surrounds Unalaq trying to trick Korra into allowing for the Spirit of Darkness, Vatu, to be freed from the prison the first Avatar sealed him in. That's an interesting plotline, and it does end with a good example of a secret third thing. Not allowing Vatu to roam free, but also not sealing away the spirits again, but allowing balance as Korra allows open access between the spirit world and the mortal world. However, that's not the part of Season 2 I want to cover. About halfway through the season, Korra has to go through an internal journey through her past lives back to the very first Avatar and see how he became the Avatar in the first place. Korra sees in memory how a young man named Juan lived in a city in the time before benders existed. He and his friends live in poverty, surviving on stolen scraps while a rich family lords over the village and hoards all the food. He's frustrated with his powerlessness in the face of this inequality, so he hatches a plan to gain power and food for himself and his friends. The men in his village sometimes go into the spirit wilds to hunt, and the lion turtle that protects and supports their city grants them each the ability to firebend temporarily. Juan uses this as a chance to gain this power and then sneaks back to the city. He leads the others in a rebellion against the rich family, and they steal their food stores for themselves. When he gets caught, he's banished permanently to the spirit wilds. Though initially afraid, he ends up befriending the spirits that live there. When word of his survival gets back to the city, those oppressed by the wealthy family decide to gain their own firebending and follow him in. After Juan travels the world and finds other cities and other lion turtles, gaining the power of bending in all four elements, he eventually returns to the area near his home city. He happens upon his friends and is excited to see them, only to learn that they have been at war with the spirits and are in the process of burning their whole forest down. Despite his best efforts, Juan is unable to stop the war, and in the end, the spirits and humans annihilate each other. Through seeing these memories, Korra learns the history of the Avatar, as well as important information about the spirits Vatu and Rava. But what lesson can we gain from this specific part of the story? The spirits have been dealing with problem humans for a long time. They regularly would come into their home and show themselves to be violent and selfish. The spirits initially don't trust Juan. It's only after he proves himself to be noble and selfless that they change their opinions about him. So, naturally, when new humans come into their forest brandishing fire and refusing to leave, they push back. However, the humans perceive this as an unprovoked attack, another in a line of people trying to take the power from them. The people of the Proto-Fire Nation city are oppressed, and they're right to fight back against the specific people oppressing them. But when they follow Juan into the spirit wilds, they take their anger at their oppressors and use it to attack those who had nothing to do with it. Fighting against oppression is important, but the way that both the humans here and the Equalists in Season 1 do so just leads to burning down the world. As in Season 1, and what I referenced from the original Avatar series, a major problem exists when the fight is against the wrong people. We can see throughout real-world history how marginalized groups unnecessarily fight each other, or use marginalization of another group to advance their own causes. Take, for example, the early 20th century in the United States, where women were seeking the right to vote. All too often, white suffragists would be racist toward women of color as a way to advance their own goals. This issue and others like it still persist today. So what would have prevented the war between the oppressed humans and the spirits? What solution could they have come to in order to live in peace? When Juan enters the spirit wilds, he is just as unwelcome as any other human has been. He initially blunders around, literally stepping on the creatures who live there, and generally makes it clear he doesn't belong. But when he takes the opportunity to show kindness to one of the animals, even at the sacrifice of filling his stomach and getting injured by the humans he fights to keep away, the spirits soften toward him, realizing that he's someone who could be a real ally. Wanda lives in harmony with the spirits from that point onward. The other humans, however, do not follow this path, but they could have if they understood it. If every human had been like Juan, they could have learned to coexist with the spirits of the forest. As a real world example, lots and lots of women are wary of men, and I don't blame them. I myself have quite a bit of trauma inflicted by many different men, and I know many women have had it far, far worse than I have. After all of that, when you have an area that's meant to be a safe place for women, like the forest is for the spirits of the show, it's natural to want to keep it that way. However, I've also seen lots of feminist spaces that are welcoming to women and to men if they're going to be cool about it. If a man can show that he's an actual ally with no ulterior motives, women tend to be a lot more open to him. You can see this with well-known male feminist content creators like Speech Prof, Professor Neil, Sizer, Will Hitchens, and others. But all too often, men at best come blundering through without understanding how they're stepping on the women around them, and at worst, actively seek out feminist spaces so that they can harass and hurt the women there. All of that said, that's my perspective as a woman. But I'm also white, and am therefore also the position of the villagers, and I need to watch my step when it comes to race. It's my responsibility to educate myself on the experiences of people of color, as well as to listen when I'm told where I've gone wrong. Like Korra in Season 1, I have privilege, and a lot of it may still be in ways I'm unaware of. But when it's pointed out to me by someone in my life, or online, or at a protest, or wherever, it's on me to make sure I don't get defensive like Korra did. If I want to be a true ally, I have to show that I'm willing to learn and grow. Further, it's my responsibility to take what I've learned and speak up to other white people. If someone says something racist, I need to call it out. I need to do my best to speak up for those who aren't there or elevate the voices of those who are. There are many ways I can use my privilege to speak to others who share the same privilege and maybe get some traction that others can't, and it's my obligation to do so. So, not accepting oppression, not hurting others while fighting back, but a secret third thing: listening to each other and learning to coexist. Season 3. Season 3 covers Korra's fight with the Order of the Red Lotus, a group that wants to topple governments and cause the world to fall into chaos. The leader of the Red Lotus, Zahir, makes for an interesting villain because, like Amon, he isn't entirely wrong in his motives. His conclusions and his methods, however, are very wrong. One of the things that makes Zahir sympathetic is that the government leaders he talks about, the President of the Republic of Nations and the Earth Queen, are not really the best leaders, ranging from incompetent to evil. To start with, President Raiko is largely weak and ineffective. In Season 2, when he's faced with the warring water tribes and the ability to put an end to it, he's determined to stay neutral when Korra asks for help. While diplomacy is usually ideal, as I talked about with regards to the previous seasons, remaining neutral is not the same thing. When there's an active conflict, neutrality often means allowing the oppressors to continue to harm anyone they feel like harming. In this case, President Raiko refusing to intervene meant that the Northern Water Tribe could attack and take control of the Southern Water Tribe with no interference. In Season 3, Raiko contends with the humans being somewhat unhappy about suddenly sharing the world with the spirits now that the portals are always open. However, when he doesn't have an easy solution, he immediately puts the blame on Korra to take the pressure off of himself. As Korra tries to deal with the issue of the vines in Republic City, he brings reporters to make sure that others see Korra if she fails, hoping to boost his own numbers. When Korra ends up disagreeing with him about what to do with the spirits in the vines, he kicks her out of Republic City. All in all, not the best leader. The Earth Queen, on the other hand, is more on the evil end of the spectrum. She burdens her people with exorbitant taxes just to build her palace and give herself a life of luxury rather than helping the people in any way. When airbenders start showing up in Ba Sing Se, she hides their existence from Korra while sending the Dai Li to kidnap them, conscripting them into a secret army. The new airbenders are treated as property and forced to fight each other during the training or be punished. The Queen is controlling and cruel, and rightfully despised by many of her people. When Zahir tells Korra that one of the goals of the Red Lotus is to bring freedom to the world by removing government leaders and ending the delineations of the different nations, he points out that Korra has had her own frustrations with the President and the Queen. He proposes that the world would be better off without them, or any other leader. Korra disagrees. After Zahir assassinates the Earth Queen, Ba Sing Se predictably falls into chaos, with rioters and looters taking full advantage of the situation. This was part of Zahir's expectations. He had earlier told Korra that the natural order is disorder. Ultimately, the Red Lotus is looking for anarchy, where a man's only allegiance is to himself and those he loves. Again, so much of this show seems to be a lesson in the problems with extremes. In Season 4, Toph points out that all the prior villains had reasonable motives, but they were totally out of balance and took their ideologies too far. Quite often, the secret third thing is something completely separate from either extreme. If the extremes are 1 and 10, the answer isn't necessarily 5, maybe the answer is the letter A, something entirely outside of the given spectrum. This would be especially true in Season 4. That being said, sometimes the spectrum does come into play when finding balance, as is the case here. There's an adage attributed to George Washington, but was not George Washington, but rather a collection of different sayings from over the centuries that says, more or less, government is like fire, a dangerous servant and a fearful master. Other versions describe it, or many other powerful concepts, as a good servant and a bad master. Regardless of the original quote or who said it, the point I want to go with is the fire analogy. Fire is great. If you look back in time hundreds of thousands of years to even over a million years ago, ancient humans learning to use and later create fire was a major advancement in their evolution and early societies. Fire cooks food, provides warmth and light, keeps predators away, helps in the creation of new tools, and acts as a clear gathering point in the night for early man's social interactions. Even today, fun social gatherings might involve beach bonfires, roasting food over fire pits, and telling ghost stories around a campfire. But also, fire is dangerous. Wildfires rage annually in many places around the world, and many people lose their homes and sometimes their lives. Even in small quantities, fire you aren't careful with can cause burns at varying levels of severity. What starts as something small can easily spread and burn out of control. But the risks inherent in fire don't mean we try to end access to it entirely. We need fire for its benefits while maintaining enough control of it to mitigate its risks. These ideas are also true of government. Government can unify citizens, provide necessities like roads and schools, and protect its citizens through legislation and fair enforcement. But if allowed to get out of control, fair government turns to tyranny. Taxes meant to be used for the common good become an excessive burden on the people used to prop up lavish lifestyles of their leaders. Legislation no longer benefits the citizens it was designed to protect, and law enforcement becomes a weapon to silence dissent. But, as we saw in the show with Zahir and the Red Lotus, destroying government, extinguishing the helpful fire, is not the solution. The question becomes, where along the spectrum between the freezing dark and a destructive wildfire should we maintain the government? A major factor is how much control the common people have over the government. In the show, as frustrating as Raiko was, he was a democratically elected leader who could be, and later is, replaced by someone the people liked better. The people of the Earth Kingdom were stuck with their queen whether they liked her or not. In an ideal situation, all government leaders would be both competent and genuinely good people with the best interest of the citizens as their primary goal. Since that's not a guarantee, we as citizens should reserve the right to replace leaders with better ones, thereby controlling our fire to our liking. How much legislation is too much? How should our taxes be used? How much and what kind of oversight should be placed on those in positions of power? These are all decisions that determine the size of our fire, and are decisions that the community benefiting from and risking the dangers of the fire ought to be allowed to determine. The actual structure of the government to meet this ideal gets a little more complicated, but control of the fire that is government is vital. So, not tyranny, not anarchy, but a secret third thing: government in the hands of the people. Season 4. The main focus of Season 4 is on Kuvira and her military empire as she tries to end the Earth monarchy and unite an Earth empire by force. Kuvira ends the series as perhaps the most sympathetic villain yet, as Korra finds a way to understand her and give her grace at the end of their final battle. The person presented as the other option in this false dichotomy is Prince Wu, and he goes through his own growth over the course of the season, culminating in him being the one to provide the secret third thing. After the Earth Queen is murdered in Season 3, the Earth Kingdom is in chaos for some time. Tenzin and President Raiko visit Toph's daughter, Su Beifong, to ask her to take the Queen's place in Ba Sing Se, but she refuses. She describes what would happen as marching into Ba Sing Se with armies and looking like a conqueror, which Su wants to avoid. Her captain of the guard, Kuvira, disagrees with this decision and decides to take the security force she led and go stabilize Ba Sing Se herself. After her success, the other world leaders name her as temporary leader of the Earth Kingdom, with the intent to crown Prince Wu the new king once things are back under control in the rest of the Earth Kingdom. Prince Wu is an idiot. Kuvira knows this, and she's not the only one. When she refuses to cede power at his coronation, her actions are alarming to many, but some others think she might make a better leader anyway. Bolin, for example, actively works with Kuvira for a time, because all he sees is the prosperity she's brought to the Earth Kingdom cities over the last few years. But he doesn't see that after they leave, things become worse than they ever were. Enslaved citizens, prison camps for dissenters, and threats of destruction if they don't swear their allegiance to her. Season 4 initially presents the issue as having only two possible answers: Wu or Kuvira. At one point, Bolin and Mako argue, with this false dichotomy a base assumption in their argument. Bolin supports Kuvira because she's clearly smarter than Wu, and he believes she actually has the best interest of the Earth Empire at heart. Mako doesn't particularly like Wu either, but he can see that Kuvira is outright dangerous. In truth, they're both bad options, and the answer lies somewhere else. Let's start with Kuvira. Like all the villains in this series, Kuvira has understandable motives. This is mostly explored in the last episode, where Korra discusses some of Kuvira's past. Kuvira had been orphaned, not by the death of her parents, but by parental rejection, and she was taken in by Su at a young age. This rejection led to a feeling of vulnerability that she never wanted to feel again, and seeing the country fall into disarray and be vulnerable brought all those feelings to the forefront. But, like the other villains, she took her solution too far, and any sort of tragic past does not inherently redeem her. She becomes aggressive and takes Zaofu by force before attempting the same with Republic City. At the same time that all of this is happening, Korra is going through her own troubles. After her fight with Zahir in Season 3, along with all the other villains she's fought, Korra is left with some pretty bad PTSD, as well as an unknown physical ailment. As she heals, she tries to understand balance better. In the past, she'd been very aggressive herself, but now she wants to make a shift into using diplomacy where she can. When she's faced with Kuvira's aggression towards Zaofu, she hopes she can reason with her rather than fight her the way Su wants her to. Su tells Korra that Kuvira can't be reasoned with, and that it will end in a fight. Korra isn't wrong to want to try diplomacy, She's right that there is an option beyond sit and do nothing, or go into the Avatar state to demolish Kuvira's army. However, Kuvira quickly proves that diplomacy is not going to be an option. She tells Korra that the only way she will stop her from marching into Zaofu is to physically stop her, leading to an unavoidable fight. This parallels real life and builds on points I made in seasons 1 and 2. From season 1, I made the point that person to person culture shifting has a lot of power, and that's generally done through talking. From season 2, I talked about how listening to each other and finding the best ways to coexist instead of fighting leads to greater understanding and peace. But here in season 4, we have a time where fighting is essential. In real life, we absolutely find people like Kuvira, people who can't be reasoned with or talked out of their harmful views. Going back to feminism for a moment, I've known several good men who had some misconceptions about the movement when I first met them. However, because they were good men who actually did respect women, as we became friends, they listened to me, like Korra does with her friends in season 1. They learned a lot about common experiences that men and women have, and in turn, I learned more about the perspectives of men and why they often respond the way that they do. That said, I am not under the impression this works with just any man. I'm not going to go befriend someone like Andrew Tate or other leaders or strong believers in the manosphere. I like talking to men, but if I'm met with blatant misogyny that allows no room for reasonable discussion, I push back. This issue of dangerous people in the world extends to all types of bigotry and marginalization. Some people are like Juan, already allies, ready to go. Some people are like Korra, misguided and ignorant of the issues, but willing to learn. And some people are like Kuvira, unable to be reasoned with and actively harmful. And you can't respond to Kuvira's like you do to Korra's. On the other hand, we have Prince Wu. Prince Wu is not only a fool who doesn't know how to lead, he doesn't care about leading. For his coronation, he just wants a big party where he's the center of attention, without any thought of the governing that comes next. He's spoiled, and he always assumed that, like the queen before him, it was just guaranteed that he would rule, regardless of how anyone else felt about it. His entire world shifts beneath his feet when Kuvira refuses to give him that power, and he has to start to grow up. Progress is a little slow at first. He's terrified of the world, unable to even go to the bathroom on his own, and any ideas he has to help are childish and useless. As the season nears its climax, Kuvira is headed toward Republic City with a mega weapon, and the leaders discuss their own weapons they can use to defend themselves. At this point, Wu comes up with his first good idea, evacuating the civilians before Kuvira can get there. While this is a wise decision that shows actual leadership skills, it turns out the motivation is mostly performative. He figures being a man of the people will get him a date with Korra. Regardless of his motive, however, the evacuation idea is genuinely helpful, and his later actions result in him learning how to actually lead. As the show heads into the finale, these leadership decisions start to become sincere. When Mako is trying to get the city to evacuate and is just starting a panic, Wu takes over and manages to calm the city and help everyone get out in an orderly fashion. When the evacuation gets stalled because the rail lines get blown up, he thinks quickly and gets help from earthbending badger moles who create underground tunnels for the people's escape. When they're nearly trapped by Kuvira's soldiers, he pretends to offer himself up as a prisoner to protect the people. But it's actually a strategic ruse to distract the soldiers until the badger moles attack and everyone can get away. And at the end, Korra is no longer on his mind to influence any of these decisions. Despite Kuvira's tragic past making her motivations understandable, and Wu's early character being selfish and responsibility avoidant, Wu somehow ends up being the better option. It's this character growth that allows him to present the best option, the secret third thing. Unlike season 3, the secret third thing is not somewhere in the middle of two extremes. The answer is not a little bit of monarchy and a little bit of military tyranny. After Kuvira is defeated, Wu tells Korra and Mako that his final act of leadership will be to dissolve the monarchy altogether and allow the states to be independent and elect their own leaders. He's learned to care about the people and grow as a person so much that he's willing to relinquish everything he once cared about in order to put the people first. Not monarchy, not tyranny, but a secret third thing, democracy. As I said about season 3, government leaders aren't perfect. It's not realistic in real life to assume that those in power will be so good as to always willingly give up power in the best interest of the people. But we can do our part to get ourselves closer to that reality. The protester in the very first episode is right to protest. Even if he didn't change Korra's mind, he informed others about the inequalities and did plant a quiet seed of information within Korra. In addition to educating our friends and acquaintances, we can also be a force for change on a larger scale. Get involved in your community, sub in a school, or campaign for needed education reform. Vote. As we do these things, we can change the culture, learn from each other, take control of the fire of government, and we can get closer to having honest and true leaders who serve the people and make the world a better place. So what are your thoughts on false dichotomies? What about revolutions, culture, governments, and affecting change? Share your thoughts in the comments. This video is part of a series I'm doing focusing on heavier topics in kids' stories. So if you want to see more of that, and the more adult stories coming later, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. You can also support the channel by liking, commenting, or sharing. And until next time, keep reading, keep watching, and keep digging deeper. Thanks for watching.